Okay, I'm going to show you a quick setup for the APC40 and Ableton so that you can start DJing right away. This is going to be simple, but it should give you some of the basic features that you'd want for DJing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reassign a couple things here. For example, our tempo here, we're going to want to assign a knob to that. And I'm going to use our cue because the last thing I want to do is assign it to something like this here that can get bumped. If I assign it here, we should be good. So I'm going to hit MIDI and I'll just twist this knob, and now we've got our tempo set. I'll set mine to 100 to 140. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set this here to the cue volume. There we go. So now we've got our cue volume. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to assign these 1 and 2 to this section right here. So this I'm going to put to 1 and put that to 1. And I'll show you what that does. If you're playing 2 tracks, which are playing now, when you hit the 1, you'll be able to see the waveform of first track. Hit 2, the waveform of second track, so you can switch between the two real easily. Next thing that we're going to want to do is your cue out. I'm assuming that you have a sound card that has at least 4 outputs. Now I'm using the internal sound card just to record this video, but if you have an external sound card, which you should, you're going to want the cue out set to whatever comes out of the headphone jack. So if sound comes out of 3 and 4, then that's what you're going to want to assign the cue to. If it comes out of 1 and 2, then you'll want to assign the cue to that and then assign the master to a different output. Next thing we're going to do here is dial in some return effects. So I'll just drag a simple delay here. I'll just drag it over here. And I'll drag a reverb here. And the reverb, I'm going to turn the low cut on. We'll set the decay pretty high. Set the quality to high. And the wet and dry all the way up. And then with the simple delay, set the wet dry all the way up 100%, and I'll turn the feedback up around 75%, and I'll set this to 3. I tend to like that just for a basic delay effect. Next thing I'm going to do is drag in an EQ8 because we don't want our effects to get muddied up with the low frequencies. So I'm going to set a high pass filter to 130. I'll put that right there. And I'll go ahead and copy this. And paste it over here, and I'll set that. Okay, so now we've got our basic send effects. So if we're playing this, we can go to our send A right here. And now we've got our delay. And our reverb. Just like so. And it's the same for both. So it'll be track 1, track 2. Send A, track 1, track 2. Now if you want to reassign these, you can. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll put send A, send B, send A, send B. And that works nicely if you don't have a whole lot of tracks going on here. So this is just for like a basic 2 turntable, 2 CD deck type of version. You can have as many tracks as you want, but this just shows you the basics. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to get some EQ3s set up. So I'm going to drag EQ3 like I just did, hit Command G to group it, and I'm going to assign the low to macro 1 and the mid and highs to macro 2. Alright. The next thing I'm going to do is go to the map mode, and I'm going to set the max of all these to 0. That way when I have these maxed, they aren't going too loud. It's very difficult when you're moving knobs to figure out where your 0 point is, so I just like to make 0 point the maximum. And then the next thing I'm going to do is on macro 2, as you see, the mid and the highs are both going all the way to 0. I don't want that. What I want is the highs to not go all the way down. I'm just going to have it reduced by about 8 dB. And now, as you see, the mids will go all the way down, but the highs will still remain in there, but just a little bit less. I'm going to copy this, go ahead and paste that in, and now I'll go to the MIDI and I'll assign these. So this here is going to be the EQ. So I'm using, instead of the pan here, let me actually undo that. I'm using the pan here because I don't use that for DJing. So instead I'll use this for EQ. So these two will be track 1, track 2, and if I have 3 and 4, I usually use those as well. So what did I just do? There we go. Let me get rid of this and that, and I'll copy this again. Okay, so now we're going to assign our MIDI. So track 2, we'll assign the low to 6 here, and the mids and highs to 2. Then I'll jump over to audio 1 and assign the low to 5 and the mids and highs to 1. Set all those all the way up. So when you're EQing your songs, let me turn this all the way down. I'll play both tracks up at the same volume. And I can bring the EQ down on this one while the EQ is coming up here. And the bass. And that's just an easy way to mix from one track to another, or at least use your EQs. I find it pretty flexible. Okay, so the next step I'm going to take is I'm going to add a filter, and the filter is going to be controlled by the auto mapping. So what I'll do is drag an auto filter in here, and I'm going to set it so that it's a high pass, and I'm going to group this. The reason I'm grouping this is because when I group it, I'll set this as the first effect. When I group this, it's going to automatically set these up for the macros. So whatever I assign the macros to will automatically map here. When I jump over from one track to another, it will automatically map to the first effect. So we'll end up copying this over to the second track. And so let's go ahead and assign the frequency here to macro 1 and the Q to macro 2. And I'm going to set, the resonance here. I'm going to set this to about 1. Go to the map mode. set the minimum to 1. Now these are mapped. So if I'm playing this song here, and I can have the resonances just like so. So now I'll copy and paste this over to audio 2 and then drag that first. So you want to make sure these are highlighted like so, which they are. And now when I jump back and forth between 1 and 2, you actually got to have your tracks playing. So let's say we have both tracks playing. Jump back between these two. Track 1 automatically assigned. If I go to track 2, filter. Got my EQs. Got my sends. And that's a simple setup for the APC in Ableton for 2 tracks. Now if you want to take it a step further, you can, considering that you're going to use a DJ mixer, what you would do is you would send each of these tracks, you'd send this to audio 1 and 2 and this one to audio 3 and 4. But then you'd have to duplicate your sends, and I'll show you how that's done. So we'll add 2 more return tracks, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy this and paste A to C, and I'll copy B and paste it in D. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want the effects, the send effects on track 1 to come out of output 1 and 2, and the effects for track 2 to come out of 3 and 4. So what we would do is we would assign these ones to 1 and 2, and if I was using my my DJ sound card instead of the internal, I'd assign these to 3 and 4. Okay. And then the last thing I would do is I'd go over to the MIDI, and on track 2, instead of them automatically being assigned to A and B, I'll assign them to C and D. So I'll go to send A, turn on the MIDI, click on C, and there we go. Turn that off, switch, turn it back on, and assign send B to there. So now let me just go ahead and assign this. I'll assign that to 1 and this to 2, and I'll assign these to 1 and these to 2. So now when I play this track here, when I send the effects, you'll see the effect come out here, which is the same output as this. And then track 1, same thing. There's our reverb coming out of the tracks or the output 1, and the delay, same thing. And that's pretty important when you're mixing, because you don't want the effects from track 1 to be coming out of your output of track 2. It'll get confusing and it just won't sound right. Other than that, that is how you can set up for either just directly using the APC40 or using the APC40 and a DJ mixer as well. The only thing that you could cut out if you're using a DJ mixer is you cut out the need to have an EQ effect, because you can use the EQs on your DJ mixer. So I hope that helped. There's your simple setup.